So in this video, I want to talk to you about the solar performance that I've had for April, May and June this year, Q2. I also want to talk to you about two other subjects. One is related to taxation. The question is, I'm exporting electricity and I'm getting some money for it. Do you have to pay income tax on it? The other question closely related to tax is the matter of property values. Do property values go up when you add solar panels to your rooftop? So if you haven't watched my previous videos, my name is Anthony and I own a 9 kilowatt solar panel array up here in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. I've got plenty of videos which describe the financial and technical performance of these solar panels in great detail. So I wanted to start off with changes to the SolarEdge interface. What we have here is the old dashboard, and in the old dashboard, especially when you're using the energy bank battery, you have details of solar production and export, and you have details of your total consumption and your import. What it doesn't show you is where that consumption went. It doesn't show you whether it came from your solar panels, whether it came from your batteries, and how much it's imported. So what's happened now is that there is a new dashboard. Let's go and take a look at it. And this dashboard has been in operation for about 2, maybe 3 months. What you see here is how much of your solar production went to your house, how much went to your battery, and how much went to the grid in terms of export. And then you've got a separate graph, which is on the other side. It's a completely symmetric graph to your production, almost. You've got consumption from the solar panels. You've got consumption from the batteries, as you can see in the evening time. And then you've got imports from the grid. Now, I quite like the data you've got here. And you've still got comparative energy remarks from for the previous years. So I can see, for example, that June 2023 is better producing than June 2021. We'll talk about that later. So you've got this information is the same. What isn't the same is if we go back to the old dashboard, you can select individual days quite easily. You can select a calendar, or you can just scroll through the days by choosing previous and next as you see fit. Same again with the months. If we select monthly power and energy, you can just simply choose individual months as you see fit, and it will come up with this data quite easily, just a couple of mouse clicks. Let's go to the new dashboard. Let's see how things work out. So the first thing you'll see is that it shows the last 3 days worth of production, and I can't change that. I like to see production for just today. So if I want to go to production for just today, I have to select today. And that's an extra 2 mouse clicks compared to just simply logging on. It would be nice if this information was saved by default each time you exit the dashboard. And then when you come back in, it would stay the same here. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Now, if we go for the month, choose the month, what you'll see is that it doesn't show a graph for the calendar month of July. It shows a graph for a rolling month. So it starts on the 25th of June in this instance, and it goes until the 25th of July when I'm recording this. And if you want to have it for the month of July, you have to manually select your data like so. And then you will get your month of July. And then if you want to get the month of June, you have to add a few more mouse clicks. And in my opinion, it's not as easy as just having previous and next. Although, mind you, I haven't seen these buttons. Let's just try these. So no, it's not quite the same. So it's gone from the 3rd of May to the 1st of June. So it's taking a fixed daily interval and ignoring the fact that each month has got a different number of days. If we select back again, it's the 4th of April and so on. So it requires more care to set up your graphs. But when we do set up our graphs, we can export data to CSV, like so, and we get some more information. We can see, for example, on the 4th of April, how much energy has gone to the battery and how much battery energy we've had coming out of the battery. But this is energy coming out of the battery for consumption. There is no energy recorded coming out of the battery for export. You can see, for example, 1,973 watt hours compared to 3.9 kilowatt hours. You can see that there's about 2 kilowatt hours of energy which isn't accounted for. So we don't have a graph, a column for export from the battery, which is something that they need to improve on. So those are the differences between the old and new dashboard. So let's talk about the months of April, May and June. So if we go down to the comparative energy, you can see that April has been faring a lot worse compared to the previous 2 Aprils of operation. 815 kilowatt hours of electricity generated. May has been doing better than the first May, but it hasn't been doing as good as last year. But June has been an absolutely fantastic month. This has been the best June so far, 1.15 megawatt hours. So let's have a look at April as an example. So you can see we've got about 3 days, 19th to the 21st of April, where we generated 50 kilowatt hours of electricity. So that is very good indeed. If we have a look at those in detail, you can see it's a classic bell curve. And the thing about this is how I am using my battery to maximize production. So what can you see here? Well, we're not charging the battery up in the morning. We are charging up the hot water in the morning, but there's still plenty of electricity being exported. And what we're doing is we're charging the battery up with any surplus electricity above 5 kilowatts. As many people know who have watched my channel previously, I've got an export limit of 5 kilowatts. So above this 5 kilowatt line, we can use that surplus instead to charge up the battery. Then once the battery is fully charged, typically around 3:30 in the afternoon, 3 to 3:30 in the afternoon, we can then keep that battery charge, and then we can discharge the battery in the early evening time, and we can then export that surplus electricity at 5 kilowatts, discharge half of the battery, and we get the best price for that surplus electricity that we collected in the middle of the day. This is what I do. In this instance, I was not at home at all, so you can see my consumption is extremely low. You've got a few spikes in the middle. That's just the hot water controller topping up. And this is typically how I've been using my battery during the long spring and summer months. So let's have a look. Let's go back to April and we'll have a look at the worst day of the month. Let's see, which one is it? That's 3.9 kilowatt hours. That's 3.7. So 27th of April was the worst month. So again, you can see it's 4 kilowatt hours of generation. You can see 1.5 kilowatts of peak power. And you can see there's been a gradual charging up of the battery during the daytime. So very little energy has been exported to the grid on this particular day. Before we go on to May, let's go back to April again. This is very interesting. Look how much electricity we imported. Just 10 kilowatt hours of electricity imported from the grid for the whole of April. You compare that to export. Export was 426 kilowatt hours, and this is on the Octopus Flux tariff. So I was getting paid 21 pence per kilowatt hour. So this was worth £80 to me. And this, on the other hand, that cost me about, I think it was 35 pence per kilowatt hour, so that was £3.50. Goes to show the benefits of solar plus batteries. Let's have a look at May. And as you can see, we've got some much better days later on in the month. So the best day here was 54 kilowatt hours. Again, it was almost a perfect day, just a few skirmishes from some clouds. And one of the things you can see is in the beginning of the month, production was very poor indeed. Some of these days we had persistent fog for the whole day. Again, I wasn't at home during these days. And one of the things I will like to just say is the fact that I've got a battery means that even though I'm not at home, I can actually maximize the value of my solar panels by exporting electricity at the peak evening time prices. Let's go into June. Some fantastic production figures. Early on in the month, you can see 58.5 kilowatt hours. That's our peak for the year. That compares to 59 kilowatt hours for a single day. That's the record for 2022. You can see here the import was quite high for the first half, and then it was very low. This was, of course, my holiday period. What you'll also see is how much we imported. Only 4.5 kilowatt hours of electricity. I think that is really very good indeed. So one other thing I wanted to talk about are the returns of my solar panels for the year so far. Now, if we look at this number here, £1,600, it is a bit misleading. What are we doing? We're looking at the savings for self-consumption, and we're looking at the export revenue for the year so far. Now, export revenue, very reliable data. That's very good. But self-consumption needs a bit of conditioning. What are we doing? We're measuring savings against the Octopus Go tariff. Why am I measuring savings against the Octopus Go tariff? I'm measuring savings because that would be the tariff that I would be on if I did not have solar panels. And the thing about self-consumption is that it also includes car charging. And car charging should not be measured against 40 pence per kilowatt hour. Car charging should be measured against 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour. That was the price I agreed with Octopus when I signed up for Octopus Go last October. And that would be the tariff that I would remain on up until October this coming year. As it is, the question is going to be, how do you separate out the car charging from here? And the answer to that question is quite difficult. Let's go to the My Energy account. And here you can see device usage, and you can see what the charging is for the day. And if we have a look at the custom period, you can see you can get charging for this month, and you can get charging for last month. But when it comes to a custom date range, and in this particular instance, I want to look at charging from the end of February until the end of June. That is all pretty much exclusively solar charging for my car. It doesn't give you any options for date ranges. It only gives you options for specific dates. So I would have to manually choose each date in here, and I'd have to extract this number from each date, and I'd have to do this data collection very slowly and very painfully. And this isn't very good at all. What other options do we have? Let's have a look at my Tesla account. Well, here are the charging statistics for my Tesla, and you can see how much of my charging has happened at home, and you can also see what we've had for charging for the last 12 months. But you cannot see what the charging is on a more granular level. So for example, I can see charging stats for the month and for the last 12 months. But what I cannot do is zoom in on a particular date range and see how much of my charging has come from home. What I can see is how much has been charged up in total. So we've got 3,500 kilowatt hours. I wouldn't look at the total spent. That's not particularly representative at the moment because it makes the assumption that none of my charging has come from solar panels. So I could take 63% of 3,500 kilowatt hours and look to see how much of that charging happened between the months of April, May, June and July. But I can't see individually on these individual months what the actual number of kilowatt hours is, which is goes back to the problem I've got. It's very difficult to segregate out self-consumption for car charging from domestic energy consumption, which is a bit of a shame, shall we say. So now on to the matter of taxation. In the United Kingdom, we've got two forms of taxation. One is income tax, where you pay tax on money received. That covers both earned income, where you work for your pay, and it also covers unearned income, such as interest in a bank account. They've all got different treatments in terms of taxation and thresholds. And the question is, where does solar export generation lie within all of this stuff? So the good news is that income derived from the feed-in tariff or income derived from solar export is exempt from income tax liability. We can see on the HMRC website, we have got this article here. It's called Income Tax Exemption for Domestic Microgeneration. So from the tax year 2007 to 2008, there is an exemption for income tax for the sale of electricity generated by a microgeneration system. And it applies to domestic premises. It does not apply to business premises. And the intent of the individual is that the amount being generated will not significantly exceed the amount consumed on the premises. So this statement here is subject to some guidance. What is significantly exceeded? They say, in general, a householder who does not intend to generate an amount more than 20% in excess of their own domestic needs is unlikely to be regarded as intending to significantly exceed the amount of electricity consumed. So let's say, for example, you consume 3 megawatt hours of electricity and you generate 7, then you would be liable for income tax on the electricity that you sold on that surplus 4 megawatt hours of electricity. But what it means, for example, is that you could be importing 4 megawatt hours of electricity and you can be exporting 4 megawatt hours of electricity. And because you're importing during the evening time and exporting during the daytime, the amount of electricity you're consuming is about the same. So in that situation, you're not liable for income tax. The other thing you need to be mindful of is this word here. It is the intent of the homeowner. It is not the actual result. So if, for example, you have been sent away from home and the home is empty for a period of time, then you're generating more electricity than you're consuming. That's not necessarily your intent to have that situation. That may be a situation that arose after you installed your solar panels. Conversely, you may be generating a lot more electricity this year, but next year you might be buying an electric car, in which case your consumption is going to be much higher. But I will say this item here might be an item which provokes quite a lot of discussion as to whether driving an electric car is electricity consumed on your premises. That is something I imagine the HMRC will clarify and not in our favour in the future. So in general terms, income tax is you're not liable for it, just depending on the size of your solar system in relation to your domestic consumption. It's worth bearing in mind that in other countries, and in particular Denmark, the Danish tax authorities have a typical tax. It's about 0.9 kroner per kilowatt hour on all electricity sales. And in addition to that, you've got VAT. So this is very similar to fuel duty in our own country. In Denmark, they actually tax self-consumption of electricity from your own solar panels. This generation meter is fiscally important in terms of accurate metering. In our country, this energy meter is essentially it's a legacy standard from the days of feed-in tariffs. I don't have a feed-in tariff, but the MCS standard remains, but that's not a legal requirement. In Denmark, they took the view that the more people have solar panels on their rooftops, the less tax revenue they get. And they wanted to counter that by taxing self-consumption. And the consequence of that is that you can go to Denmark and you will find very few domestic properties have got solar panels on their rooftops. And that's a great shame. On the other hand, hot water solar, that is apparently a very popular solution. And the difference between the two is that you can't meter hot water in the same way that you can meter electricity generation. So, of course, anything you can't measure, you can't tax. So, isn't that convenient? So the next section of my video is one of property values. If you make £20,000 worth of investments into improving energy performance in your house, do you get an additional £20,000 worth of value added to your house on the housing market? So we can compare two properties in my local village of Inch. And this property here is got an asking price of £240,000 and it's 99 square meters. If we have a look here, you can see that the standard of the fixtures and fittings is pretty good. Then we've got this property here, much bigger, 182 square meters, and it's got an asking price of £275,000. Again, in terms of interior, it looks, in my opinion, immaculate. So the difference between this property and that property, the asking price is just £35,000. So let's get my spreadsheet, and you can see right here, £35,000 is a 15% price difference, but an 84% difference in size. And they have got the same energy performance certificate, which is really all that matters. That's the only metric you look at when it comes to considering a property and how well it does in terms of bills. Whether it's accurate or not, that's another YouTube video. I'm going to talk about that a bit more. But £35,000 is the difference. So the question is, if you had this small property here, let's say, for example, you put solar power on here and on this roof, and you also put in a home battery, and let's say you put in £25,000 worth of upgrades to insulation and heating systems. The question is, does that make it a £265,000 property? You have to measure that investment and that value against this property here, where they're asking £275,000. I think most people in my country, in Scotland, would say that this is better value for money, even if you did do substantial upgrades to the energy performance of this, brought it up from a D rating to a B rating in this instance. Now, I've had a chat with an architect and also some surveyors, and they have said the same thing. Energy performance doesn't really affect the value of property all that much. The market doesn't it doesn't value good energy performance when it comes to houses. In other countries, it does. But despite the fact that we've had some of the highest energy prices, we don't see any impact on property values based on whether your house is poorly performing or not. That's a shame, and it's going to take a lot of questions as to how energy performance can be valued properly in a housing market. So to finish up this video, I want to talk about the user interface for operating this battery in a bit more detail and ask the question, has anything improved since I got this battery installed last September? Now, for system owners, there are only two options you have available to you in this box here and also on the app. You can select the installer settings. You can select maximum self-consumption. The other option is time of use. And time of use, if you select that, the only thing you can do with that is select your peak hours. And when you read the literature as to what peak hours means, it can mean one of two things. It's either the time when you discharge the battery to make maximum export, or it is the time when you want to use the battery or the solar system in order to supply your consumption needs. That to me is wrong. To my mind, you want to have all of the options which are available to installers. Let's go back into installers and let's just see what we have. So here you can see I've got lots of different daily profiles for the spring and summertime. Let's go here. You can see overall 2 days this week I'm discharging in the evening time, and because it's not terribly sunny, I'm just simply maximizing self-consumption after 3 o'clock on other days, and I'm not discharging the battery. I can change these profiles as I see fit, and in my opinion, this is the kind of operational detail which every system owner should have access to, and yet they don't. This is reserved for installers only, and in my opinion, this is absolutely wrong. I've had one installer comment to me on YouTube comments saying that this is an installation issue for a reason. I disagree. These modes of operation are not installation matters. They are matters of operation. It's rather like having your garage for your car telling you that you cannot drive the car. It's reserved for the garage to drive the car for you. It makes no sense. You want to operate the battery in order to maximize value for your own house as you see fit. In this instance, I am changing these settings maybe 2 or 3 times a week, just depending on what my usage demands are and what the weather forecast is. So to ask an installer to change these profiles on that kind of frequency is going to result in an installer wanting to charge you maybe £100 or £200 every time they open up this menu option, and I don't think that's acceptable. It's worth bearing in mind that SolarEdge have been interfacing with batteries for quite a number of years now. They've had what's known as a StoreEdge interface, and they've had LG batteries before the current Energy Bank. But as of September last year, we've seen no changes and no improvements in terms of controllability for individual system owners. Since September, I've found this battery to be very efficient indeed. I've also found this battery to be very reliable indeed, and it hasn't crashed. I haven't had to carry out any hard resets of this battery. I haven't had to do any power cycling. I haven't even had to reboot the software. It's just been very reliable. And yet it's a great shame for me to say this, but I cannot recommend any system owner actually owns and procures this battery. There are 3 main purposes to a battery. Number 1 is to minimize your grid imports. Number 2, if you can't minimize your imports, then at the very least you should be able to shift your imports to cheap import prices that you have in the small hours of the night. And number 3, you want to maximize solar production, overcoming any solar clipping issues that you have with your inverter or with grid exports. and then take that stored energy and be able to export it in the long summer months during the expensive early evening period where you get your best value for buck. And you don't have those controllability options with this, and that's a real shame. Well, that's all I've got for this video. So I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you again very soon.